So friends, good morning. Last class we have been talking about X-ray diffraction. People usually refer to it as XRD. This X-ray diffraction, we talked about the principles of X-ray diffraction, and we started talking about what are the applications of X-ray diffraction. We said the first application is determining, for example, orientation of a single crystal. For many applications, you need single crystals. And so you need to also know what is the orientation of the single crystal. For example, if there is a cylinder of a single crystal, I would like to know what is this particular direction. The direction which is the axis of this particular cylinder. So what is the HKL? For example, is it in a 001 direction, or let's say 110 direction, or 111 direction? I would like to know this. If I want to know what is the axial direction of this, so that I also know many properties depend on various directions. So as a result, people are interested to generate single crystals with a specific orientation so that they are useful for a particular application. So as a result, it is important for us to know what is the direction. That is where we said we can use two techniques. One is a Lave technique, or rotating crystal method. Any one of these two can be used where an X-ray is allowed to fall on a single crystal with a particular orientation, and you can generate a diffraction pattern, and from the diffraction pattern you can find out what is this particular orientation. For example, in a Lave technique, we said we will use a white radiation carrying a range of lambdas, and it falls onto a single crystal, and from the diffraction pattern that you get, either in a transmission mode or in a back reflection mode, you can find out the orientation. The second technique is where you have a rotating crystal technique, where this crystal is made to rotate, the single crystal, and an X-ray is allowed to fall on it, and the diffraction pattern that is generated on a cylindrical film which is kept around this particular single crystal, you get the diffraction pattern, and from the diffraction pattern again you can analyze the diffraction pattern and get to know what is the orientation. So this is one of the important applications of X-ray diffraction. The second one is to find out the crystal structure of an unknown, let's say, powder sample. I said these single crystal techniques are used only for a specific application where single crystals are used. For most of the applications, we do not use single crystals. So as a result, we use polycrystalline materials which have a large number of grains, and for example, a powder represents powder particles. Every particle, if I take a powder particle, if you take, let's say, a sand grain kind of a thing, so each particle is composed of a number of grains, and each grain is a single crystal with a certain orientation of atoms. For example, the difference between each of the grain is that the orientation of atoms, atomic planes, are different in each of these, but each of them is one single crystal. So that means this particular particle is composed of a number of single crystals. And in such a material, how do I find out the crystal structure? So that is where we said we basically use traditionally, historically, if I look at it, there was a technique called Debye-Scherrer camera which was used, but many people nowadays do not use such a camera, but what people use is a diffractometer. So this is what we started talking about, how to use a diffractometer to find out the crystal structure. And we said the easiest is to find out the crystal structure of cubic materials, and we started talking about how to find out the crystal structure of simple cubic, BCC, FCC, things like that. We said if I have a pattern, for that what we said is that you take the first of all a sample, a powder sample. It is, let's say, the best way to do is you take a glass sheet, on that glass sheet put some kind of a glue, and then see to it that some powder particles are kind of stuck to this glass tube with the help of some let's say glue. And if that is if you keep that kind of a glass slide in the direction of the X-rays and make sure that the X-rays fall on those powder particles, you generate an XRD pattern. And this XRD pattern usually will have peaks like this. This is what we saw at certain angles where the x-axis is 2 theta and y-axis is a intensity. And we said by looking at these patterns, we will be able to find out what is the crystal structure. And the method that we use here is basically trying to take first job that we do is note down the 2 thetas. For example, 2 theta 1, 2 theta 2, 2 theta 3, and so on and so forth. Then we try to find out the sine square theta for each of these. Sine square theta 1, sine square theta 2, and so on. Why do we do sine square theta? We have seen it in the last class. If you use this most important expression for X-ray diffraction, which is what is called the Bragg's law, you can see that lambda equal to 2d sine theta. So for a given lambda, in a powder diffraction, we always use a fixed lambda. For example, copper K alpha. If I am using a fixed lambda, then you see that the theta basically depends on the d. As a result, we can see that if I know the theta, I can find out the d. And at the same time, we also have seen that for different crystal structures, there are certain extinction conditions. For example, we have said for FCC, if the HKL are such that if they are mixed, then you do not get any diffraction pattern, any intensity for that plane at all. What do I mean by mixed? That means if HKL, some of them are odd or some of them are even, then you will not get any peak corresponding to such a thing. For example, let's say if I take a 100 or 110, you see here 2 of them are odd and 1 is even, and such a peak does not exist in a FCC pattern. Similarly, a 100 plane will not give a diffraction, will not show any intensity in the diffraction pattern for an FCC. So the best condition for seeing the peaks in a FCC is that they should be unmixed. That means either they all should be even or all should be odd. That means, for example, 111, you will see this because all of them are odd. Similarly, 200 or 220, things like this, because they are all even. So you will see these peaks. So you can see that by looking at the HKL planes, we know which kind of planes do exist, which kind of planes do not exist in an FCC. Similarly, in case of BCC, we know that H plus K plus L should be even in order to have a certain intensity of the diffracted beam from that particular plane. If the summation is odd, then the intensity of that particular diffracted beam coming out of that plane will always be 0. So as a result, we have certain conditions. In case of simple cubic, we said there is no such condition. All HKLs are all possible. Any HKL which is an integer is always possible. So once I know this, we know that the planes that appear in a diffraction pattern for a particular crystal structure are a certain fixed planes only. Not every plane will appear. And as a result, if I look at the FCC, for example, we said FCC has these planes. This is, if I take the squares of this, it is 3, 4, and then this is 8, 11, and then 2, 2, 2 is 12. So if you look at the h square plus k square plus l square, if this is HKL, h square plus k square plus l square goes like this. So if I take the ratio of the h square plus k square plus l square from the second peak to the first peak, it is always 4 by 3. Knowing pretty well, this is what is the characteristic we try to use to find out what crystal structure it is, if it is known to be a cubic crystal structure. So what we simply do is first obtain the diffraction pattern and then see to it that we already know what are all the planes that are possible for an FCC, for a BCC. BCC, for example, these are the planes that are possible. 110, 200, 211, 220, and then let's say this is 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 310, that's 10, and so on. So we know that these are all the planes that give diffraction. So, and here if I take the ratio is 2, the first 2 planes. So if and how is this ratio is connected to the sine square theta? If I want to know, I can take this and find out what is the connection between D and HKL. If I look at what is the connection between D and HKL, in case of cubic, we know D is nothing but A by square root h square plus k square plus L square. And if I can combine these two, I can say that basically sine theta in this case is equal to lambda by 2D. And I can say sine square theta is equal to lambda square by 4D square. And if I can also square this, I can say D square is A square by H square plus K square plus L square. If I take this and square it. So in place of this D square, if I put this, you will see that sine square theta is nothing but lambda square by 4 into A square comes down and H square plus K square plus L square. So you can see that sine square theta is related to H square plus K square plus L square with a constant called lambda square by 4A square. So in principle, if I take the ratios of sine square theta for each of these peaks, I am actually taking ratios of H square plus K square plus L square. So if I take the ratios of H square plus K square plus L square, it is proportional to the ratios of these two. So what I simply do is for each of these peaks, calculate what is the sine square theta and take the ratio of the sine square theta for the second peak to the sine square theta for the first peak, take the ratio of the sine square theta for the third peak to the first peak, and so on and so forth, and find out what are these ratios. So it is, now you put here the third column, call it as ratio of sine square theta. So you take the 2 to 1. So if you take the 2 to 1, you find out the ratio. And if this ratio turns out to be 4 by 3, we say it is FCC. If the ratio turns out to be 2, then we have a confusion. We have talked about it in the last class, that this 2 can also belong to a simple cubic. Because in simple cubic, what are the planes that can give you diffraction? 100, 110, 111, 200, and 210, and then this is squares are 1, a square plus k square plus L square is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is 211, and then 7 is 2, 2, 1. No. 7 will be 2, 2, 0. 2, 2. 7 is not possible, we said. So the next one is 8. Because there is no 7 that is possible. So if I take the ratios here, you will see that it is 2, then 3 to 1. If I take the ratio, it is 3. 4 to 1, if I take the ratio, it is 4. 5 to 1 is 5. And 6 to 1 is 6. 7 to 1 is 8. Whereas here, if I continue the ratios here, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, and the next one will be 2 to 2, which is 12. So this is the ratio is 12 is to 2 is 6, and then the next one is 14. 14 is 3 to 1. The summation is always positive. even, you can see 3 plus 2 plus 1 is even. So that means BCC is the one where this should be even. So this is also possible. So if I take the squares of it, 9 plus 4 plus 1 is 14. So take the ratio of this to this, you will see it is 9 to 7. So if you see first peak, second peak, third peak, fourth peak, fifth peak, sixth peak, seventh peak to first peak, if I take the ratio, it is always 7 in a BCC, and seventh peak to first peak, if I take the ratio, it is 8 for the simple cubic. And by looking at this, we said we will know whether it is simple cubic or BCC. So this is how we can easily find out simply by looking at this. Of course, the life is not so easy. Not all materials fall as simple cubic or BCC or FCC. So what do we do for others? For other systems also, there are methods like this, excepting that the methods are a little more complicated. For example, one can do this for tetragonal, one can do this for orthorhombic, rhombohedral. All those can be done. But because they are more complicated, people resort to much simpler methods. The simpler method is simply to go to a standard handbook, which people call it as ICDD, which is called International Committee on Diffraction Data. And in that handbook, you have all the compounds or all the metals that people know, all the phases that we are aware of. For them, the XRD patterns are all given. So I try to take my material and try to get a diffraction pattern and compare the d spacings that I get. How do I get the d spacing? Simply because I know this formula, lambda equal to 2d sin theta. So if I know the theta, from theta, I use the lambda that I know, I can find out the d. And once I find out what are all the 2 theta 1, 2 theta 2, and so on. For example, here just now we said. So what we simply do is instead of finding out the sine square thetas, now I simply find out the d. So d1, d2, d3, d4, and so on. This, once I find out, compare these d's with these patterns. But because there are thousands of compounds here, it is not so easy to compare. That is the reason why it is important that we know something about this particular material. So the best thing to start with is, if somebody gives you an unknown sample, unknown alloy, you first do a composition analysis, if you can do. This is the first step one should do. If he knows, if he has a facility for doing the composition analysis, the best thing is first to know. And if I do the composition analysis, and if I find out that my alloy contains mostly aluminum, and with some amount of copper or zinc or magnesium or something like that, and matrix is mostly aluminum, then I can say this is an aluminum based alloy. Now what do I do? The next thing, I will try to go to the phase diagrams of these aluminum copper, aluminum zinc, and aluminum magnesium. Let us say, if my alloy is showing these elements, then once I go to those phase diagrams and find out what are all the possible compounds, if there are any compounds with these particular elements. For example, I know from aluminum copper there is a compound called Al2Cu. For example, aluminum magnesium, I also know that there is a compound Al2Mg. There is also another compound Al19Mg12, for example. Like this, I know what are all the compounds that are available in those phase diagrams. Now what I do is, I have simplified my search. I have identified what are all the possibilities. So that means this alloy might contain aluminum as a solid solution with all these elements dissolved in it. The second possibility is these are the compounds that are possible. Now I start searching only those phases, and then first I will look at first aluminum. Out of all these some 10 peaks that are available or so, find out which are the peaks are matching with the d spacings of aluminum in the ICDD handbook. I put a tick for all of them and then say, okay, these are all aluminum peaks, D4, D5, D6, D7, like that. So I will say the first one is aluminum, third one is aluminum, let's say fourth one is aluminum, and sixth one is aluminum. Now once I find out, I will see what are all the things that are left out. and the left out peaks must be belonging to any of these compounds. And now I start looking for one by one the compound, compare these left out ones. And it is also possible sometimes that these ones are also may have a certain HKL plane of any one of these compounds overlapping with D1, D3, D4 and D6, which have been already identified as aluminum. So you have to now again look at whether there are any overlapping peaks of this, and then that is how you start identifying what are the remaining peaks. And this is the technique that we use. Of course, one can also do it without any knowledge of the Li, but that is a much more difficult search because you have to search the whole data. Nowadays, softwares are available which will simply match. Once you have a particular D spacing D1, it will say that these are all the possible matches with this D1. Once I look at that and I find out in my pattern, first of all, most important thing that I should do whenever I am searching for a particular phase in my XRD pattern is, out of all these peaks, find out which is the peak which has the highest intensity. That is the phase that is existing in my material in a large proportion. Of course, there are limitations for that. We will come to it a little later. We also discussed partially in the previous class what is the problem that we get simply by correlating the intensity to the amount of the phase. There are problems. We will come to it. But once I have known that this is the most intense peak, first try to match with this peak with something else. Let's say this peak matches with some 10 different phases. And now start looking at, choose one by one of those 10 different phases. Okay, let's choose phase number 1. And in the phase number 1, I go to the table corresponding to phase number 1, which will have basically 3 columns, where one column is HKL, another column is D spacing, another column is the intensity, I by I max. And look at whether for this phase 1, is this peak the most intense peak? Sometimes it may not be. But in my alloy, this is the most intense peak. So that means that particular phase should be the most predominant phase in my alloy, in principle. So as a result, I will try to search for if this is the most intense peak in that particular phase 1. If no, then I say no first. Then go to the phase 2, then go to phase 3, phase 4. Like that, if I keep on comparing with all the 10 phases, I will find that some particular phase will have its most intense peak matching with this most intense peak. Then I say, yes, possibly this is the phase that I am looking for. And once I say yes, then what I do is look for the other 2 intense. If this is the most intense peak, which I will call it as I1, then look for I2 and I3, which are the second most and the third most, and the second most and third most, identify which are those Ds where the first, second, third, they may not be in the same order, decreasing order or increasing order of D, but they may be in some other order. But what is more important is I will look at the most intense and the second most intense and the third most intense, and look at whether those are these 2 phases, these 2 peaks are also there in our XRD pattern. If they are there, then I say this phase is there. If they are not there, I say no, this phase does not exist in my material. Like that, we should first look at what is it. For example, the most intense peak of this particular phase is matching with that, but the second and third most intense are not matching with any of these peaks. That means this phase does not exist. So like that, I should go to some other phase and see whether it is matching. And after matching it, I will first identify that particular phase and identify all the peaks corresponding to that phase. Then start looking for the remaining peaks and then find it out. It's a little tedious task, but there is no other solution. But nowadays, life has become much easier because softwares are available where you don't need to do the search and it will do the search for you and you can find it out. This is a easy way. But at the end of all this, I only know what is the structure. Of course, if you are matching using standard handbooks, then it will give you the lattice parameters also. But otherwise, if I am simply only finding out from the peaks from the ratios of the sine square theta, if I am finding out whether it is BCC or FCC or simple cubic, I have only found out whether it is this or this or this. The next step comes for us is to find out what is the lattice parameter. How do I find out the lattice parameter? Lattice parameter I find out first, once I identify that this whole pattern is a FCC pattern, then I can choose the first peak. I know the first peak is nothing but the 111 peak for an FCC, and once I know that there is a relation between this relation is existing, and once I know that this is a relation, then I know from the first peak what is the theta corresponding to the first peak. From the theta I can find out the d. How do I find out the d? Again, go to this formula, lambda equal to 2d sine theta. So once I know the theta, because I know that lambda, I can find out the d. I plug in this d into this, knowing pretty well that the first peak is 111 peak. So that means this is corresponding to d of 111, which is equal to a of square root 3. H square plus k square plus l square, 1 square plus 1 square plus 1 square is 3. So that means once I find out that d from this formula, from knowing the theta, so I know the first peak, what is the theta for the first peak. From the theta I find out the d and put the d into this equation, where knowing pretty well the first peak is of FCC is 111, because I have already identified that this structure is FCC. So that's why in all this, first step is to identify the structure. Once I identify the structure, I know all the HKLs of all the peaks. And once I know that, from that I can find out the d, and from that I can find out the a. This is how I can find out the a. And if it is not a cubic, if it is tetragonal, so for all this there are formulas available. This formula will slightly get modified when you go from cubic to something else. But using this particular formula, we can find out A, C, B, whatever it is, all those can be found out for a particular structure. But if it is a more complicated structure where I am not able to find out using the ratios of sine square theta, which I mentioned some time back, then the best method is to go to ICDD and find out what is the phase corresponding to these particular peaks. And once I find out the phase corresponding to those peaks, in that particular data handbook itself, you will see what are the ABCs for that particular phase, what are the alpha, beta, gammas for that phase. These are all listed there. In fact, this ICDD data handbook is always continuously updated. Whenever somebody makes a new compound, they will analyze the complete diffraction pattern and they submit it to this international committee, and that international committee will verify whether these are valid or not, whether they are accurate data or not. Once they verify, they add it to their database, so that every new compound, certain metastable compounds are also possible sometimes, and all these metastable compounds and stable compounds are being added. So that is how this data is every year updated, and as a result you have the complete information of all the phases. So if you are using ICDD, you don't need to do all these calculations anymore. You will simply get what is this from the handbook. In the particular table corresponding to that phase, you will have first this data, then only the table which I mentioned, where you have the HKL and D spacing and intensity coming into picture. So this whole information is available for every single phase in the ICDD. So this is how we calculate. But this calculation of lattice parameter that we are talking about is not so accurate. Why is it not accurate is what we will see right now. We just now calculated the lattice parameter A. For a cubic phase, we are sticking to cubic because it is much simpler. And we said we can calculate this A by simply taking the first peak and using the formula that D equal to A by square root H square plus K square plus L square. And I can find out the D from lambda equal to 2D sine theta. So knowing the theta for the first peak, I can calculate the D because I know which lambda I am using. For example, if I am using copper K alpha, I know it is 1.54, not 5 angstroms. Of course, nowadays most of the people do not use these angstrom units anymore. they go to SI units. So in most of the books you will possibly find this kind of a notation. They simply show the lambda in the form of nanometers rather than showing it in angstroms, because angstroms is not the SI units. So you should in principle use this notation rather than that notation. And once you have the lambda and once you know the theta for the first week, you can find out the D. But you know that in principle I can use this equation for every HKL. So that means I can take the second peak also, which is for a FCC. The first peak is 111, second peak is 200, third peak is 220. So I know these HKLs for each of the peak. So for the first peak, I can use this formula, know the theta, first theta, find out the D, plug the D into this, find out the A. So you can get A here. You can also use this second peak, find out the theta for that, put the theta into this equation, get the D, plug the D into this, and simply put the HKL as 200, again get the A. So you can get A here also, you can get A here also, you can get A for the fourth peak also. Now if you look at all these A's, in principle, we are talking of one single material with a certain crystal structure, which is called FCC, and it should have a fixed A. But you see that this A does not match. Many a times you will see that this A is not matching with. So you don't have one single A when you calculate this. The reason is simple. The reason is this. If you look at our Bragg's law is lambda equal to 2D sine theta. Okay? And if you use that and I want to find out the D I find out as lambda by 2 sine theta. Okay? So, and what I'm getting from my XRD pattern, am I getting sine theta? I am only getting theta. My XRD pattern is always in terms of 2 theta or theta. So, from the XRD pattern, for every peak I can find out the theta corresponding to that. And this theta I am converting it to sine theta and then putting it into this equation and finding out the D. But theta to sine theta relation is not a linear relation. As a result, if you look at how the sine theta varies with theta, you will see that sine theta varies with theta something like this. Starts with 0. When theta is 0, sine theta is 0. And when theta is 90 degrees, sine theta becomes 1. Right? And this is not linear. Because this is not linear, you will see a small error in the theta will cause some error in sine theta, and that will cause some error in your D. And if you have an error in D, if you put this into this equation, you will have an error in A. And if you look at these errors carefully, you will see that because this particular plot is steeper in the initial domain when compared to this region, which is closer to 90 degrees. So at this domain, a small error in theta will cause a larger error in sine theta when compared to somewhere here, where if I use the similar error in theta, for example, if this is some delta theta, if I use the same delta theta here and that delta theta, the error in sine theta is smaller. So the error in the sine theta is not linearly related to the error in theta. So at lower angles, the error in sine theta is more for a given error of sine theta, whereas at higher angles, I will see that this is not the case. So in principle, if somebody asks you, find out the lattice parameter, you should actually use the theta or a peak which is at a larger angle, something closer to 80 degrees or 90 degrees, something like that. And if I can find out the theta for that particular peak, which may be a 220 peak or some 311 peak or some such peak, so which is a high angle peak rather than choosing a low angle peak. And if I choose a high angle peak, then even if I am making small mistake in the theta, I do not make a big mistake in the sine theta, and as a result, I do not make a big mistake in the D, and hence my lattice parameter is more accurate. But there is a problem here. What is the problem? The problem is that we do not have many a times all the peaks available in my XRD pattern. One limitation could be the lambda that I am using. Last time I told you that D minimum is lambda by 2. We have said this because the maximum of sin theta is 1. When I put that, D minimum that you get is lambda by 2. So the number of peaks that I get are limited by lambda, and sometimes it may so happen that the peak intensity of the high angle peaks is very small. Sometimes if you have a large background noise, you will not be able to see the high angle peaks. Particularly if you are taking a nanomaterial. Nanomaterials problem is, nanomaterials there is a lot of peak broadening. And the peak broadening is larger and larger with higher angle peaks. As a result, you would see that the low index planes you will be able to see very easily, but high index planes, their intensity is so small. They are so broad, and as a result, they may kind of the height is very small. They are so broad because of which the height is very small, and this height may even merge into the background noise. In every X-ray diffraction, it is not so plain. You will always see some noise. And this noise is happening because of random scattering that is happening whenever an X-ray is falling on the sample. And because of this random, if your peak is very small and that small peak merges into the background, so you may not be able to distinguish it as a small separate peak. So you have difficulties in that. So as a result, people have suggested certain other ways of finding out this particular lattice parameter more accurately, and that is what people now call it as precision lattice parameter calculation. And to understand this precision lattice parameter calculation, let's try to do a small calculation with this particular formula that we know. For example, if I know that D is lambda by 2 sin theta, I can differentiate this delta D by delta theta. If I do it, D by d theta of D, if I do, this is lambda by 2, which is constant, into 1 by sin theta is cosecant theta, right? So differential of cosecant theta is minus cosecant and cot theta, right? So now if I take it as delta D, which is a variation in D, error in D, if I want to call it, can be written as lambda by 2 into cosecant theta cot theta, minus is there, minus comes out, and delta theta. This formula tells you that for a given error in the delta theta, I have a certain error in the delta D. For a given error in the theta, I have a certain error in the D. And now if I take a ratio of delta D by D, that means I am normalizing the error with respect to the D. If I do that, it is this, basically this, I am trying to bring into the denominator, dividing this with this. If I dividing with this lambda 2 goes off, this sin theta goes above, and that will get cancelled with cosecant theta. You will see it as minus cot theta d delta theta. This is a formula that you get, which tells you that the variation in D or the error in D caused by an error in theta is related to this, which is related to cot theta. What is cot theta? Cot theta is cos theta by sin theta, right? So if it is cos theta by sin theta, then if the theta is very large, then what happens? As the theta tends to 90 degrees, cos theta tends to 0 and sin theta tends to 1. That means the cot theta tends to 0 as I go to 90 degrees. So that is what it tells you, that at large angles, because this is 0, whatever may be the error that you have in theta, the error in D will be 0. Okay? Irrespective of the error in delta theta, at theta equal to 90 degrees, because this part is 0, then this will be 0. So this is what is the principle that we use. Why we go to high angle peaks, why we do not use low angle peaks is because of this. If you go to high angle peaks, then this becomes 0 at higher angles, and as a result, irrespective of my error in theta, my error in delta D will be very small. And so this is a principle that is used, and then people did a lot of analysis and then found out that that this delta D by D can also be written as delta A by A, because I know that D and A are connected. And you can see that delta D by D can be written as delta A by A. Why? Because D and A are proportional, as you can see from here. So as a result, I can always do the same thing. Delta A by A is minus cot theta by into delta theta. Right? So as a result, I can say the same argument which I said earlier, that irrespective of the error in theta, if I am using a large angle peak, the error in my lattice parameter will be very small. And as a result, I can use this higher angle peaks to find out lattice parameter more accurately. And to find out this, what people have done is they tried to do some analysis, and then in principle found out that if I take delta A by A, people have found out to be proportional to cos square theta. I will not go to the details of how this is arrived at, but this is one of the formula that is regularly used for finding out the precision lattice parameter. So what people simply do is plot the lattice parameter as a function of cos square theta, and you see that as cos square theta increases, that you will see the lattice parameter will increase, and find out when cos square theta is 0, and when cos square theta is 0, delta A is 0. Okay? So whenever the cos square theta is 0, then the A that you get will be the precise A, because the error in A is 0. So people extrapolate. So what they do is, you have a number of peaks. You first take your diffraction pattern. You have a number of peaks here. For each peak, calculate the theta and calculate the cos square theta. And not only calculate the theta and cos square theta, also calculate the A. How do I calculate the A? From the theta, I get to this, find out the D. From the D, I find out the A. So I have a table now with cos square theta versus A for each of the peaks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For each peak, I first find out the theta. From that, I can find out the cos square theta, and I find out all this. Similarly, I use the Bragg's law and this relation. From that, find out the A. So I have this. So I simply plot A versus cos square theta, and I get a relation like this, and extrapolate that to where the cos square theta goes to 0. And once the extrapolation is done, so I get certain points like this on this, fit it to a least square fit, and once I do a least square fit, extrapolate that particular line to where it is intersecting and where this is 0. And then whatever is what you read on the y-axis is the precise lattice parameter. And this is the method that regularly used. And because we know cos square theta is 1 minus sin square theta, I can also do the same thing by simply replacing this with sin square theta. Because this is 1 minus, so again k into sin square theta will come, and this k into 1 will come. That will go into only the intercepts, and there is no problem. So the intercept get modified a little bit, but you can in principle use the A versus sin square theta and then again wherever that sine square theta goes to 0, you can find out that. Or wherever sine square theta goes to 1, in principle you can also do that, because 1 minus 0, 1 minus 1 is 0, so A is. So simply you replace this as k into 1 minus sine square theta, plot it with sine square theta, take that value where sine square theta is 1. Okay, wherever sine square theta is 1, this delta A is 0. So I will use, instead of cos square theta being treated as 0, I will take sine square theta as 1 and extrapolate it up to sine square theta as 1. And wherever this is being extrapolated, that value of A, I read it out as that. Of course, only difference is, in this case, the lattice parameter may be decreasing like this rather than increasing, as I told you earlier. Okay, so if you are plotting with this or with this, there will be a reverse tendency, because the lattice parameter is the same, whether you use this or this. For a material, lattice parameter is there same. So if I use this, I get one lattice parameter. If I use this, I get another lattice parameter. You should not get. You should always get the only one lattice parameter. So this is another technique that we use. Of course, all these are people have found are more suitable if you are using higher angle peaks. So people have come up with another function called Nelson-Rayleigh function, where they have found that delta A by A is given as some constant again into cos square theta by sin theta plus cos square theta by theta. Again, a little more complicated function, but they said that this particular function gives you much more accurate lattice parameter than anything else. So what I do, for every peak, I find out the theta. From that I find out the A, and again find out this whole function and plot the lattice parameter versus this function and see where this goes to 0, and then from that I can find out the lattice parameter. So this is how we have to get a precise lattice parameter, and then you can talk about it. And in fact, one of the beauties of X-ray diffraction, that it gives you very precise lattice parameter. For example, if I use electron diffraction, you won't get a very precise lattice parameter. So the lattice parameter precision that you can get is up to 0.001 angstroms. This is the precision that you can get with a Nelson-Rayleigh function. Of course, all this can be done provided you know how to calculate the A. For a cube, it is very easy, cubic systems. For a complicated systems, it may be more difficult to find out A. And as a result, people use what is called Rietveld analysis and techniques like that, where to find out more the A. And once you have the A for each of the peak, if you are able to find out, but if it is a non-cubic system will not have only one A. So you will have A, B, C, all of them. So all of them have to be found out more accurately if you want to get a precise A, precise B, precise C. So the calculations become a little more complicated. So you have to plot the A versus this, you have to plot the B versus that, you have to plot the C versus that, and then from all that you have to find out the precise values. So these are a little more complicated. So what people regularly do is, for complicated structures, they only simply depend on ICDD. If your XRD pattern is perfectly matching with that particular diffraction pattern, whatever is the lattice parameter shown for that particular structure in that data handbook is what is taken as the lattice parameter. This is an easy way to do, but of course that has to be confirmed. The reason why you need to confirm this is this. Many a times your phase may not be exactly matching with this. For example, if I talk about a phase such as beta brass. Beta brass is a copper zinc phase, and beta brass exists over a range of composition. It is not a fixed compound. It is not like a Fe3C, that it has a fixed composition called 6.67% carbon. There are also many other compounds. For example, NiAr in a nickel aluminum phase diagram exists over a range of 45% to 55% of nickel. Then if I look at ICDD, he will give you NIAL lattice parameter, NIAL table, and what he gives you is for a 50-50 composition. If your phase by any chance in your system has 45% of nickel or a 55% of nickel, obviously your lattice parameter is going to be different. So the lattice parameter that is given in the ACDD may not exactly match with your lattice parameter. So as a result, you get a slightly difference in lattice parameter. That is where you have to make sure that whether this lattice parameter that I am seeing is corresponding to a different composition or not. And so I have to ratify this by doing a composition analysis of my alloy and being able to compare with the composition analysis and be able to confirm that yes, what I am getting is corresponding to this composition or this composition rather than a 50-50 composition. Okay, we'll stop here and continue